So I'm Jeremy Carver, and I'm currently the President, CEO, and CSO of the International Consortium on Antivirals. My background, as you can tell from the color of my beard, I've been around a while, so how far back do you want to go? In brief, an academic for 28 years at the University of Toronto in the medical school, a basic scientist, medical genetics, biophysics, these kind of areas. I ended up associate dean from basic science in the medical school for a few years, and it really was an experience of developing what we thought as a group was a potential anti-cancer, let's say, therapeutic strategy, which we were able to do with a grant from the Terry Fox Special Initiatives Program, recognizing that that discovery was never going to get into the clinic unless we did something about it. And so 4 of us from the university founded a company called Glycodesign in 1994 and grew it over the subsequent 8 years to 100 employees, a public company traded on the TSE, with 150 million market cap, and got into phase 2 clinical trials with this strategy that had come out of our university labs. So those were the golden days of venture capital, when one could raise that kind of money in order to actually test a hypothesis. Those days have passed, and in this next iteration I decided to apply my experience from the academic world and the business world and create this not-for-profit, which I did with my partner Michel Chrétien, and this concept of an internationalized form of the Canadian success story, the network of centers of excellence. So we created International Consortium on Antivirals to try to replicate the success that we felt the protein engineering network had in Canada on a global basis, and accelerate the development of antivirals, because of course SARS had come along and we realized that when it came to treating infectious disease, we were basically left with tools from the Victorian era, quarantine and contact tracing, and we had nothing else really to offer. So there was a huge void, and we felt the way to approach it was globally, because infectious disease is a global threat. Well, what I described here this morning was 2 initiatives that we're engaged with. One is in setting up a dengue therapeutic network, which was just launched at our 9th International Symposium in Germany this past October. This pulls together investigators from 12 different countries to try to span the whole level of expertise needed to develop a drug. So from drug discovery through to proof of concept in vitro, in vivo, and then preclinical development, to get a regulatory package together to get permission to go into humans, and then clinical trials centers with the patient populations are already identified, and the expertise, the trained clinical trial personnel. So we've put that together, and we have some initial candidates that we are hoping to put through that process to bring therapeutics to bear on this, on a disease that's CDC has said in Atlanta has said they think is the next major threat for the developed world, even though it's predominantly in the tropical and subtropical countries right now. So that's one. There's the other piece that I talked about was our efforts to develop treatments for the people who were seriously ill in the most recent pandemic. Despite the emphasis that's placed on vaccination as a public health strategy, we still had ICUs that were overcrowded with people, young people who'd been very healthy and yet were on ventilators for weeks and weeks because their body had not mounted a sufficient immune reaction to combat the viral infection. And so we were developing monoclonal antibodies isolated, or let's say identified from infected patients, so known to be directed against the virus. And then the intention was to use those to supplement the immune response in the severely ill and try to help them recover. Needless to say, that hypothesis is yet to be tested. We got through the process of identifying a large number of monoclonal antibody sequences, producing them, and showing that we could cure mice. And we're on to the next step, which is ferrets. Ferrets are the gold standard model for influenza. And ultimately, we hope to have conversations with the regulatory authorities about what if another pandemic emerges, what would be required to get rapid approval to go into humans with these kinds of therapies. At the last count, there were over 500. It's an informal organization where people join by participating. So we don't issue certificates or charge membership fees. What happens is we have our international conferences around the world. We've had, as I say, 9 on 5 different continents. And then we have local organizers so that we make sure that roughly half the audience is made up of local scientists who have a commitment not just to virology research, but a commitment to antivirals, to actually doing something to provide treatments for infected individuals. And so that's, people self-select. And as I say, since 2004, there are about 500 people who've identified themselves as participants in ICAV from 32 countries. I'm just writing our 5-year report on the first 5 years and drafting the section on what's coming in the next 5 years. And it's a challenge because one of the potential major activities is a proposal that we have in front of the Ontario government right now, and without knowing whether they're going to fund it or not, I don't know how to write this script for the next 5 years. But that's to create a facility at Trent University to actually produce these monoclonal antibodies rapidly and under what are called GMP conditions where they could be used in humans. This monoclonal antibody platform, can be applied to any infectious disease because we make antibodies against bacteria as well as against viruses. And so it has huge potential and could be the cornerstone of a new industry here in Ontario. But until we know that we've got the players, the potential funders for the early stages on side, I don't know whether that's going to be a big part of our next 5 years, but I hope it is. Well, I mean, the easy flip answer is money, or as I laugh because in my days when I was raising money for the biotech company, Glycodesign, you go to conferences and the young analysts for the VCs would get up and they'd say, well, you know, I have 3 criteria in which I judge companies for investment. Management, management, management. And I get up and say, I have 3 criteria that I use to judge VCs, and it's money, money, money.